The American West was built on legends, but few were as dangerous or as mysterious as the man they called Wild Bill. Standing over 6 feet tall with flowing hair and piercing eyes, he wasn't just another gunslinger. He was a Union spy during the Civil War, a detective who tracked down outlaws, a lawman who tamed entire towns with nothing but his reputation and a pair of Colt revolvers. They said he could outshoot any man alive, that he once killed 3 outlaws with a single bullet, that he never sat with his back to a door, because in his world, survival wasn't about luck, it was about skill, instinct, and always being one step ahead. But behind the dime novels and tall tales was a real man, a gambler who lived by his wits, a showman who toured with Buffalo Bill Cody, a man who could spot a card cheat from across the room, but couldn't see his own fate coming. Because on August 2nd, 1876, in a dusty gold rush town called Deadwood, Wild Bill Hickok made one last mistake. He took a seat at a poker table, in the one spot he always avoided. And in that moment, the West's greatest gunfighter became its most famous victim. This is the true story of how legends live, and how they die. Long before the dime novels and gunfighter fame, before the poker tables and showdowns, James Butler Hickok was just a farm boy from Illinois. Born in 1837, young Jim grew up hearing stories of the frontier, a wild, untamed land where a man could rewrite his destiny. At just 18 years old, he left home for adventure, first as a stagecoach driver, then as a scout guiding settlers westward. But it was the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 that would change everything. The quiet farm boy became a Union spy, slipping behind Confederate lines under the cover name William Hickok. His missions were deadly. Disguised as a Confederate soldier, he gathered intel, sabotaged supply lines, and even helped track down rebel bushwhackers. One failed ambush left him with a bullet wound, his first taste of combat, but far from his last. Then came the moment that would define his legend. In 1861, at a remote Nebraska outpost, Hickok faced down a violent gang leader named David McCannels. What happened next depends on who tells the story. Some say it was a fair duel, others a brutal ambush. But one thing was certain: when the smoke cleared, McCannels was dead, and Wild Bill had earned his reputation as a man not to be crossed. By war's end, Hickok had survived guerrilla fights, espionage missions, and frontier justice. He returned not as a farmer, but as a hardened man who'd learned 2 vital lessons: how to read people, and how to use a gun faster than anyone else. The Civil War had ended, but for James Butler Hickok, the battlefield simply changed locations. The summer of 1866 found him in Springfield, Missouri, where the air smelled of whiskey and bad decisions. The saloon was packed that night. Card sharks, drifters, and one Davis Tutt, a Confederate veteran with a chip on his shoulder and a hunger for Hickok's gold. "You gonna pay what you owe, Bill?" Tutt's voice cut through the cigar smoke, his fingers drumming on the polished Colt at his hip. Hickok didn't look up from his cards. "I pay my debts when they're owed, not when some 2-bit gambler comes calling." His voice was calm, but every man at the table felt the danger in it. The next morning, they faced each other in the town square at 75 paces, the longest duel anyone had ever seen. Women pulled children inside. Men hid behind water barrels. The sheriff pleaded with them to stop, but both men knew this dance had only one ending. Tutt drew first. His shot kicked up dirt at Hickok's feet. Then came that terrible, familiar sound, the bark of Hickok's Navy Colt. Tutt looked down in surprise at the red stain spreading across his shirt before his knees buckled. The crowd erupted, but Hickok just holstered his gun and walked away. He'd made his point. By 1869, his reputation had grown larger than life. Towns desperate for law came begging. Hays City was the worst, a cesspool of outlaws and killers where the previous 3 marshals had ended up in Boot Hill. Hickok cleaned it up in his own way. When the McCannels gang rode in looking for revenge, they found Hickok waiting in the street, both Colts already drawn. 2 men died that day before the rest turned tail and ran. Abilene was different. The cattle town smelled like money and blood. As marshal, Hickok walked those streets like a gun-slinging Moses, parting the sea of outlaws with nothing but his icy stare. But even legends have weaknesses. Hickok met a man named Phil Coe who wasn't like the others. A former Confederate captain turned saloon owner, Coe had a silver tongue and a rattlesnake's grin. He ran the Bull's Head Tavern, where he fleeced drunken cowhands and bragged about being the only man in Abilene who ain't scared of Wild Bill. Their feud started small, a dispute over a poker game, a stolen bottle of whiskey, the kind of thing Hickok would have shrugged off from anyone else. But Coe kept pushing. "They say you're fast, Marshal," Coe sneered one night, swirling his drink as Hickok passed his table. The saloon went still. "But between you and me," he leaned forward, his derringer glinting under his sleeve. "I reckon you're just lucky." Hickok didn't stop, didn't even look at him, but every man in that room felt the air turn sharp as a blade. Coe grinned, thinking he'd won. He wouldn't be grinning for long. The gunfight erupted like a thunderclap. 2 shots, Coe went down hard. Hickok's third bullet tore through his own deputy, Mike Williams. The look on Hickok's face as Williams died in his arms would haunt him for the rest of his days. After that, the badge came off for good. Buffalo Bill Cody found him drinking away the memories and offered an escape, the Wild West show. For 2 years, Hickok played himself to cheering crowds, reenacting his greatest moments for people who'd never know the weight of a real gunfight. But time was undefeated. The headaches came more often now. His famous eyesight was failing. By 1876, he was just another broken gambler following the gold rush to Deadwood, where the streets ran with mud and bad whiskey. August 2nd dawned hot and still. Hickok entered Nuttall and Mann's saloon, his usual careful scan of the room betraying his fatigue. Only one seat left, back to the door. He hesitated. For the first time in his life, Wild Bill Hickok ignored his own rule. The cards came, 2 pairs, aces and eights, a good hand. Behind him, a chair scraped. Hickok's hand twitched toward his Colt, but the years had stolen those lightning reflexes. "Take that, Hickok." Jack McCall's voice cracked with fear and whiskey. The shots echoed like cannon fire in the small room. Hickok slumped forward, his cards scattering across the bloodied table. The ace of spades fluttered to the floor last, coming to rest against his still fingers. Some say his last words were, "The old man had me." Others claim he died without a sound. But one thing was certain in that moment. The West lost its greatest gunfighter and gained its most enduring legend. The stories would grow taller with each telling, that he'd killed 100 men, that no one could outdraw him, that he'd never once sat with his back to a door, until that final day in Deadwood. The truth was simpler and sadder. James Butler Hickok was just a man, the fastest, deadliest man of his time, but a man all the same. And like all men, his time ran out. But legends never die. They live on in the crack of a gunshot across the prairie, in the turn of a card on a saloon table, in the whispered tales around campfires long after the West was tamed. Wild Bill Hickok became something more than flesh and blood that day. He became the West itself. Untamed, unbroken, unforgettable. If you enjoyed this dive into the life of Wild Bill Hickok, you're in the right place. This channel is all about American history, the legends, the lawmen, the outlaws, and the untold stories of the Old West. Every week, we bring history to life with gripping stories and fascinating facts you didn't hear in school. So if the spirit of the frontier still calls to you, hit that subscribe button and ride with us into the past.